Museum began with a vision from the late Senator John Glenn, who understood the value of telling and sharing the story of our veterans. From the initial view, the architecture impresses upon visitors the importance of what lies within. Seeming to rise organically from the earth, the building itself is a symbol of our nation's veterans and their resilient spirit and unending commitment to making this country stronger. Once inside the museum, visitors embark on a narrative journey, following exhibitions that focus on the servicemen and women and their families. Individual stories and shared experiences are illustrated through personal artifacts, quotes, letters, photographs, and powerful films of veterans telling their unique story in their own words. The National Veterans Memorial and Museum. It's more than a museum. It's the new home of the brave. Plan your visit today.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Colonel Retired Bill Butler, Chief of Staff at the National Veterans Memorial and Museum. On behalf of our President and CEO, Lieutenant General Mike Farragut, welcome as we commemorate the 30th anniversary of the coalition victory over Iraqi forces in Operation Desert Storm. On August 2nd, 1990, Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein ordered his military to conduct a surprise attack, occupation, and annexation of their southern neighbor, Kuwait. The implications were far-reaching, as this was the first test of the West after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Iron Curtain. Within days, Operation Desert Shield started as U.S. military and key allies rushed to defend their ally, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Over the next 6 months, over 700,000 American men and women in the military were rushed to the region to defend this Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and to oust Iraqi forces. On January 16th, 1991, Operation Desert Storm started. It was designed to defeat Saddam Hussein's forces for not adhering to UN Resolution 678 and withdrawing from Kuwait. For 4 weeks, coalition air forces and special operations personnel operated with impunity to set conditions for the ground offensive. The ground war started on February 24th and lasted a mere 100 hours. Sadly, the coalition lost 292 men and women killed. Today, we honor the fallen, as well as those men and women who raised their right hand to defend the Constitution of the United States and to support the world in liberating an oppressed people. Continue watching as we share General Colin L. Powell's thoughts and reflections on the 30th anniversary of Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm.
Okay, we're a go, sir. Good morning, everybody, and good morning, General Colin Powell. Today, we're going to here at the National Veterans Memorial and Museum, do our veteran voices, and we're going to honor the 30th anniversary of Desert Storm. First, it's a real honor to have General Powell with us. Now, General Powell grew up in Harlem, New York, joined ROTC at the City College of New York, and was commissioned a lieutenant of infantry. He is an Army Ranger and a paratrooper. General Powell commanded troops at every level from lieutenant to general. He had multiple combat tours in Vietnam, and then he was selected to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in October of 1989. He was the first African-American chairman and the youngest four-star at the age of 52. And how fitting is it to have you with us today to describe Desert Shield, Desert Storm, but also as a part of Black History Month, sir, and it's a real honor. General Powell played a central role in the preparation for and the conduct of the Persian Gulf War. In response to Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in August of 1990, President Bush ordered the deployment of some 250,000 U.S. troops to Saudi Arabia in Operation Desert Shield. General Powell advised keeping all options open, exerting diplomatic and economic pressure while building up sufficient forces in the region to assure quick victory if the United States and its coalition partners concluded that military action was needed. When Iraqi President Saddam Hussein did not withdraw his forces from Kuwait, General Powell endorsed the president's decision to launch an offensive Operation Desert Storm in January of 1991. Now, after his service in the military, General Powell was also served our nation as a Secretary of State, and now he continues to serve in so many ways, to include as the chairman of the National Veteran Memorial and Museum's Honorary Board of Advisors. Sir, with all that, thank you for joining us today, and thanks for all of your service to our country.
Thank you very much, General. It's a great pleasure to be with you all today, and I have the fondest memories already of the time I've spent at that fabulous new museum that was put together by some dedicated civilians and military people who are out in the Columbus area. And so let's get started, because I think this is a very exciting opportunity.
That's great. And we'll be able to bring you coast to coast and north to south as a part of this programming. But let's just start. Please describe some of the events leading up to the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait and the U.S. response.
Well, we were not looking for a war. In fact, I've told many people over the years that I'm the reluctant warrior. I don't like wars. And I try to see if we can solve anything peacefully. And in this case, we tried. We tried with Saddam Hussein and some of the other leaders in the other side of the aisle here in the Desert Shield area of this combination of events. And we couldn't persuade him. And the reason he couldn't be persuaded, he should have known what would happen to him. He couldn't be persuaded because he was pretty confident that we would not attack. He was fairly confident that his large army would deter us, and that most of our friends in the military, such as the French and the British and so many others, they would not go to war just because we're going to war. Well, he was wrong. And we got ready for war. You don't get ready for war in a day or two. We put together a massive force, but we had told the president at the very beginning, and even before the beginning, Norm Schwarzkopf and Norm was, of course, you all know, the commander of the operation. But we went to see the president long before we deployed the first soldier, and told the president that the most important thing to do right now is to put in enough troops to make sure that Iraq had no illusions about going south out of Kuwait and down into Saudi Arabia. I didn't think they would take that kind of risk, but we couldn't afford it. And so what I told the president, what Norm told the president, was we got to get forces in there as quickly as possible to deter the Iraqis from ever doing anything like that. And so within the first week or so, we had airplanes coming in from the Air Force, and we had the troops coming in from the 82nd Airborne Division and a few other forces. And we started to also bring in the logistics we were going to need. And so I just held my breath for a while to make sure that the Saudis were able to defend themselves with our help, and that it would deter the guys who might come down out of Iraq, continue south across the border, and attack Saudi Arabia. It became clear in a very short period of time that they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't take that kind of risk, even though it was a big temptation to go in the southern part of the area there and invade and take command of part of Saudi Arabia. But they didn't do it. And so we also told the president that we'd let him know when we were sure we had a large enough force to always deter them if they tried. And we told the president, Norm and I, that probably going to take a few months to do that. We want to make sure we deter for a few months. That'll give the Iraqis time to think through whether this makes sense to them. And we thought it through. And it took another couple of months. It was in early November when I was able to talk to Norm, have a long conversation, and then come back to Washington and meet with the president, the Secretary of Defense, and a few others in the White House, and tell the president that we've accomplished the first mission, which was to deter the Iraqis from ever coming south. Mr. President, we can stop here and deter and do our very best. But if you are of a mind, and we talked about this at the very beginning, sir, if you are above, about ready to not only stop them, to keep them from going in Saudi Arabia, but to knock them out so they can't go anywhere. And we thought about it. We thought about what would happen if we didn't do everything we needed to do. And we had a plan, and we told the president, and he blinked a little bit when I told him this. We want to double the size of the force. So Norm wants to do is what Mr. Cheney, our Secretary of Defense, agreed to, and it's what I recommended. And so we announced to the rest of the world within a day or so of that meeting that we were going to continue the buildup. And we were going to bring in reservists. We're going to bring in the Air Force more. And we were going to be ready for war. We still don't want war. And we had politicians on our side, diplomats working with the Iraqis and kind of telling them in a short notice, you're crazy. You will not last. But they thought we would pull back at the end. And so we continued to build up. And we were going to build up to 500,000 U.S. troops. And we also succeeded by then in bringing on a lot of other countries that were willing to go in with us, because they saw that what the Iraqis had done was criminal and they can't be allowed to get away with it. Or what would they do next? We had to stop them permanently from even dreaming of coming south. And we got a good coalition. And we got Arab nations on our side, European nations on our side, all the others that were interested, something like 28 nations. And so we were ready. And I still remember just before we got ready to start the conflict, because they were not blinking, I was able to say to the president, Mr. President, we put together a force here that is significant, and we're confident it'll work. And we're also confident that the Iraqis will not come further south. And they're probably a sitting target for us. If there's one thing I can tell you, and it comes with Norm's recommendation and Norm's conclusion as well, is that, Mr. President, this is going to be a conflict that we won't lose. There's no question of us losing this. We have overwhelmed them. We have brought in a decisive force that they could never defeat. And trust me on that. And he did. Mr. Cheney said, okay, guys, let's get ready to go. And then at the very last minute, to make sure that the Iraqis knew what they were facing, we sent in the Secretary of State then, Jim Baker. Jim, go talk to these idiots and let them know that all hell's about to break loose on them. And this is the time for them to back off and let's find a peaceful solution. I'm well known for always looking for peace and not war. I'm also well known that when war comes, by God, they'll know it. Yeah. And one of the interesting things that was taking place at that time was, well, how terrible will it be? How many men do you think we'll lose? How many men do you think the Iraqis will lose? And Norm and I had it down to a fairly modest number that, the Iraqis were the fourth largest army in the world. And so I told Norm, I said, it's probably going to be a little tough, but at the same time, we will accomplish it. And we might lose, it was a guess, we might lose several thousand American soldiers. And both Norm and I were sort of estimating that it might be up to 5,000. And I think we can do that. And so, as you all know, the war came. Part of the war that I kind of love the best, Norm came up with a plan, and he and I shared that plan, and we were ready for it. Briefed the president, briefed our Secretary of Defense, Mr. Cheney, and the plan was simply freeze them where they are and go around them. We got a lot of guys who wanted to go straight ahead. No, the president didn't like that, neither did I. But here's the reason why not. We had naval forces off the coast, and all I wanted them to do was to feint, make it clear to the Iraqis that this force can come in on the seaside, on the eastern side of the country, and take you on. And then we also persuaded them that almost everywhere in the region, we will succeed. And we noticed, but we didn't tell them, that they had not realigned their forces in any way. They didn't change anything. We looked at it for those months and brought in a remarkable force. And the plan we had was, let's not lose any soldiers that we don't have to. And so the first thing we started with was air power. And that's what we told the president we would do. and they couldn't touch our air power no matter how much they might try. It wasn't going to happen. And then once the air power had done damage to the Iraqis that was significant, it probably made it impossible for them to come south or to attack us anymore. We were pretty much ready to go, but we wanted to be safe. So we brought in more troops. As part of that 500,000, we had a corps from Germany, troops from everywhere, you name it. We were ready for this. And the president, up until the last week, we were sending emissaries to the Iraqis saying, don't do this. But they did it. And so what happened? We attacked. We attacked, and we attacked in violence, with violence. Our Air Force was first. Some interesting stories came out of that. After a few weeks of that kind of bombardment, I said to Norm, there's something a little odd here. Before we keep bombing these Iraqi tanks, let's send over an airplane that will give us a sense of whether these tanks are still working or not. Are they heated up? Can we tell that from our instruments that we look down on the battlefield? And we discovered that we can tell every tank that is no longer warm. Mm-hmm. Not warm tank is not much of a problem. Right. So we stopped bombing them and stopped wasting weapons on tanks that aren't going anywhere and can't move any longer. The 7th Corps came in under a great soldier who knew how to lead them, Corps commander, and he started to move his troops around. And we didn't want the Marines or the Navy to take on forces that could overwhelm them because they might be at some disadvantage. We didn't think that was the case, but you don't take chances like that. And so the Marines were staying offshore and being a threat to the Iraqis and letting the Iraqis know that they were a threat and just stay where you are and you may not get in trouble. And the Marines was the most fascinating part of this for me anyway. The Marines, I told specifically, General Bloomer, commander of the Marine Force, I said, now look, I want you on D-Day of ground forces moving, I want you to start moving toward the border between Saudi Arabia and Iraq, southern border. The Iraqis had put in fire tunnels, they had put in all kinds of things to deter our forces or to destroy them if they tried to cross gas mask fields or fields where you need a gas mask when the oil fires were lit. All those things we were taking into account. But I told General Schreiner, I don't want you to waste lives. We're going to beat them. I tell you right now, we're going to beat them. We don't have to waste too many lives doing it. And so he understood perfectly. But something went a little off as the war started. And Tommy Franks, General Franks, and the 7th Corps started to go around. And the Marines were kind of demonstrating out in the ocean, in the Gulf, of movement that might be coming at the Iraqis. The Iraqis never moved. They were frozen. But then suddenly I got a call on D-Day +1, ground D-Day +1. And they said, you better come here quickly. So I went to the command post. I said, what's up? He said, the Marines didn't follow all of our orders. What did they do? He said, I don't know how they did it. I'm not sure when they did it. But Marine soldiers, privates, sergeants, penetrated all of the installations the Iraqis had put in, the fuel fields that were going to stop us, the other things that were supposed to burn things up and stop us. But the Marines had gone in quietly in the dark, and they knew where they were going. They had penetrated the Iraqi line and called back and say, we got a light. We're ready to go in. Nothing's going to stop us. And the answer was, go.
Right.
And so they did. And they penetrated the oil fields with the flames that were supposed to go off, the minefields that were supposed to stop us. And within 24 hours, the Marines were on their way, and the 7th Corps was moving fast to get around them. Took a little while to get everybody in place, and we had the 82nd and other units on the flank, on the left side of the battlefield, to make sure that they could guard us on the flank and also could gain ground. And so within a few days, you know the rest of the story. The battle was fought that way. 7th Corps went far, but they were also catching up with the Marines who walked and on light infantry vehicles, almost halfway to the head of, or to the capital of Kuwait. We were on our way. We were going to win. And so we knew this was going to happen, but we were taking some casualties, and nobody could really believe what the casualties were. When the war was over, we had casualties, men who were killed or seriously wounded, of about 400 men and women. We lost women too. But half of those were friendly casualties, as always happens in a conflict like this.
Mhm.
And the casualties that were taken by war was probably a little over 300. And I said, go guys, go, as did Norm. And Norm was up there. And our troops were just magnificent, all of them. And as you know, within 4 days, it was over. I had called the president the day before. I said, Mr. President, we're doing well. We might need a few more days to settle up things. And the president's answer was, well, then why are we waiting a few more days just to kill a few more people? He said, can we stop tonight? And so I got on the phone, called Norm. We talked about it for a while. And when he said, can we stop tonight? That gave us another 12 hours to settle our battle lines up and make sure we knew where we were going and to make sure we were right about what we were saying. And so Norm agreed, I agreed, Cheney agreed, we all agreed. We did it. And within a few days, guess what? You know the story. You were there, weren't you? You know the story.
Yes, sir. I was a famous class at CGSC watching it on TV.
That's a good place to watch a war, you know?
Yes, sir.
But the facts are that everybody who participated, guys who were online, the guys who were supporting those who were online, the guys who were bringing up gas, and our friends who were coming up. The 82nd was moving. The French contingent we had there had started to move on the left flank and protect our left flank. And so it was doing everything we had hoped it would do. And the people who were back home who were saying, oh my God, we're going to lose 20,000 troops. I knew that wasn't going to be true, but I didn't know what was true. What was true was that it was a matter of just a couple of hundred. And when the American people saw that, and they stared at it, and what they stared at, well, what are these other things? That's called a missile that can guide its way all the way in. I said, what do you mean by that? I said, we got weapons now that can leave wherever they are in the south side of the border, take off, come from the sea, guide themselves. And the way I like to joke about it with people who are not really satisfied, I said, oh yeah, it works. They take off, they fly across the border, they go into downtown Iraq, and then they stop in the middle of the street because it was a red light. And then when the light goes green, they go in and blow the crap out of stuff.
Yeah.
A joke. It worked. It was true. The tanks, marvelous. Nobody else has tanks like we have in those M60s and the A1s and all the others. They couldn't believe it. And we had missiles that were taking out their air defense activity. And the tanks that were rolling across the desert were going to lose gas early on, so we had to make sure we had gas coming up. And we had it. Took a little while to get there, but they got there. And so by the end of the third day, and I have to give credit to everybody I've just mentioned, but perhaps credit should go to nobody more important than the Air Force, and Marine Air, and Army Cobras, and the newest versions of the Army ground air power. And everybody had a piece of it. Everybody was doing things well. When everybody back home in the United States saw it, all the guys who were saying, well, you know, you might lose 3,000 up there, Powell. I said, really? You know how many you were losing so far? And suddenly they became heroes. Suddenly they turned it all on. Oh my God. And the American people who weren't sure about their weapons, these were weapons they'd never seen in war before. They'd never seen an M60 A1 or something like that. They had never seen all these planes with systems they had aboard to guide missiles. They had never seen what's coming from the sea as a guided missile. And so they suddenly went crazy with it. Like, God, look at this. And the press that was very suspicious about whether this would work, good heavens, you should have seen their optimism. On day two, I won't mention who it was, but on day two, there was one of the Air Force just call him an Air Force reporter. He started reporting, it's over, we've won. And I called him on the phone. He was an old friend. I said, shut up. We'll tell you when it's over.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't know what might happen tomorrow. The Air Force part is easy. If you lose an airplane, you lose one guy. If you lose a tank, you lose 4 to begin with. And so we can multiply our losses easily. I don't think we will, but I don't want to take any chances. I want to make sure that we are everywhere and moving in the right direction. Everybody's taking care of everybody else. And by heavens, that's what happened. But Mr. Cheney and the president were saying, don't talk out loud about how well it's going on.
Mm-hmm.
By day 3, I couldn't tell them that anymore. Go. And they were going. The Marines got there first. The Army was right behind them. The Air Force was still doing what they were doing, not bombing cold tanks. But there was a lot of stuff left for them to bomb. And we were on a run. You guys all know it. You know we're there. You know what happened. We were there. The American people were going somewhat nutty with enthusiasm as to what we are doing.
Yeah.
But they were proud. They had never expected anything like this. And I was as proud as they were, and so was Norm. Norm was great. Great commander, pushed his troops, was a great symbol on the battlefield, this huge guy, Norm Schwarzkopf. Great name, too, for war.
Mm-hmm.
And he was in charge of it. And I was back in the command center, and every day from my command center in the United States, I didn't have to go there. We had communications that went there.
Right.
But in the morning, I would call Norm. He would be in the evening, and just the two of us would talk. Nobody else. Just the two of us. I knew him, he knew me. We were both 2 4-star generals. We're having some difficulties, of course. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And Norm was alone, and I was alone. We didn't share much of this with anybody.
Wow.
But that's when we became the best of friends. I didn't know Norm before this. We'd never served together. But boy, we served together for the next couple of weeks, or for those couple of weeks while this all was going on. And it was wonderful to watch these kids.
Fantastic, sir. You share so much credit to all those who did so much. It's a real leadership lesson as well as a history lesson, but a real leadership lesson for all of us to hear how you can give credit and be a teammate and show the teamwork across the services and across the leadership. Where does all that come from? Why was that important to you to build that team of people you were going to rely on?
One of the first things I heard from the troops as I got closer to them, they said, this is just like the training center that we used to go to all the time.
I was going to say that. Yep.
Remember that one? And I had to laugh because these kids were expecting the worst and they got the best. Here's the story that I always cry at. Sam Donaldson, the great reporter, came up just before we launched the ground war. And we're talking with Sam Donaldson and with commander of a tank unit. Sam and I have been very close for many, many years. And so we walked up to this tank, M60, crew of 4, M60. Did I say M60? Show you how old I am. M1. And so, but I'm emotionally taken by what I'm watching. Here's this M1 standing there with its crew out front. And so Sam Donaldson decides to have a little fun with the crew. So he says to them, how you guys doing? We're okay. Are you trained? Yes, sir. We've been well trained. We're in the National Training Center. He's talking to a private, a black private. And the kid's answering him, not the crew chief, not anybody else, the kid. No, we're fine, sir. We've been training hard. We know what we're doing. And he looked at this young private and figured, let me see if I can unsettle him. And he then spoke to this young soldier again and said, aren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid of what's going to happen? And the kid said, no, I'm not afraid.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Well, you've had 30 years. You've had 30 years to reflect on all of this. As you're asked questions about this whole thing, what do you always remember, and what's your biggest takeaway from Desert Shield and Desert Storm and all that you did?
The thing I loved having the most was GPS.
Mm-hmm.
We had the technology, but we didn't have the receivers. So one of the jokes out of this is that I sent guys all over the United States buying little GPS receivers to put in the tanks. And we got a ton of them. And these youngsters, being youngsters, they knew how to use them. And so no tank got lost. The Iraqis didn't know where they were half the time. And so that was a enhancer that made us majestic compared to them. They didn't have a chance. And the other part of that was their equipment wasn't as good. You know, you don't want to fight an M1A1 with whatever you have in your hands as an Iraqi soldier.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to watch the shots go over, hit a tank, and the turret comes off. So we knew we had that done. And we knew that the M1s were superior to anything that the Iraqis had. And within a few days, they were starting to surrender. They was giving up. And the Iraqis knew what they had received and what was going to happen to them. And within 3 or 4 days, you know the number of prisoners we had there, my friend?
I'll bet it was 100,000 or more.
It was about 70,000.
Yeah.
And we had maybe none, or a couple. We had some casualties. If you had a few people who were captured, we lost some women in combat, which was something new for us. But they were great and showed them what we could do.
Well, it's a great story, sir. And you told me that you found out about the Powell Doctrine in a very interesting way. Tell us about the Powell Doctrine.
You know, there is no such thing in Army literature about the Powell Doctrine.
Right.
And if you really study it, you will find its ancient history. The Chinese and the Germans and ancient history, the principles of war that we got from them were the principles of war that we used. And so I knew what those principles were. But I was talking to a reporter after it had ended, and he came in to see me. I can't remember which reporter it was or what the organization was. So we talked for a while, and he said, well, General Powell, come on, describe the Powell Doctrine for me. Huh? He said, the Powell Doctrine. I said, I don't know what Powell Doctrine is. He said, you sure you don't want to talk about it? I said, I'll tell you what we did. But the Army has no such thing as the Powell Doctrine. He said, well, that's what everybody's talking about. I said, that's not bad. And so I laid it up for him. I told him, the Powell Doctrine, as I see it, and as now the troops see it, was that we try not to have a war. We use every system we have, a diplomacy and all kinds of other systems, to see if we cannot bring these people to their senses. But after a few weeks of preparing, we didn't want them to give up, because then we'd be stuck with their army still intact on the other side of the border. So we reached a point where we wanted them to finish this off. And so the Powell Doctrine said, do everything you can to avoid a war. And if you achieve your objective, in other words, get the Iraqis out of Saudi Arabia and make sure they stay out, then you have won the battle. And if you haven't achieved your objective and they're coming or they're there and they're not moving on you, then the Powell Doctrine says, kick their butt. And my buddies in the military and all of the officers who were there knew that we had enough power. The grand total of troops we had with our troops and the foreign troops, 700,000. What are you kidding? You think you're going to beat us? And so we made sure they knew that. And then we went and we beat them. And this reporter said, that's the Powell Doctrine. Oh, really? Cool.
There we got it.
But you know, that's really not true. But everybody calls it the Powell Doctrine. You just did. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that.
You bet, sir. Hey, sir. So as we wrap up, any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience?
One, you've never seen better troops anywhere. You've never seen better troops equipped with great equipment in every service. You don't find out, and you don't think you'll ever find out, if there was any better Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps on the battlefield. Great. Those youngsters were terrific. And they did the job they were sent in for. They knew what they had to do. There was no mistakes as to what it was they were going to do. We did have some accidents, and the Iraqis hit us twice. They hit a tent once, a lot of troops that had just arrived. We killed a bunch of our troops. And there were some few other incidents. But everybody did their job. They all knew what they were supposed to do. And when we came home, we were given parades.
Right.
I said, parades? This isn't World War II. But the country wanted to give us parades. It was nothing we came up with. The people wanted it. And so we had a parade in New York City, down Broadway, and another one a few weeks later in New York, excuse me, in Washington, D.C. What always impressed me about those parades is as we were marching up Broadway for the first one, there was one person missing, the president. President Bush refused to come. He wasn't ashamed of anything. He just think he shouldn't be there with these young troops. And then the parade in Washington wasn't bad either, and he was at that one. Yeah. And so the equipment, and more than just the equipment, the training of the troops.
Right. Total
package. What made the difference. They all knew what to do.
Well, sir, thank you so much for today. Last question is, tell us about your involvement at the National Veterans Memorial Museum and what it means to be a part of our team.
Well, not too long ago, I was giving a speech in Columbus, Ohio, and there was something else going on in Columbus, Ohio at the time. Somebody was planning on putting together a museum, and they were going to make it a national museum for, the troops. But what made it unique, it was a museum not just for that troop battle, not just for the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and not just for any war. It was a battle for all wars. It was a tribute to all veterans, all of the millions of veterans who had served this country. They now have a museum, and it's not named after any regiment or anything like that. Mm-hmm. It's a tribute to those who fought or served over time. Men, women, black, white, you name it. That's what this museum was all about. And I wasn't planning to get it. I'm in a lot of museums. And when this one came along, I said, oh my God, this one's too cool. And when they asked me if I would serve in some purpose as one of the chairmen, I said, yes, I would. And I did. And I still am part of the museum. I'm very proud of it. We've raised money. We have brought together people who love coming there to see it. We have celebrated every occasion we could with the museum. And so the museum has been a great success. And you have to give credit not only to the troops who did it, but to the family who did it, the family you all know so well.
Yes.
I call him Les, my man Les, Absolutely. Who was a gentleman, great soldier, but not a soldier except in the way that he contributed to the men and women of the armed forces, and how he helped put this whole thing together. And it's a beautiful facility. I'm sure you'll see a picture of it before this thing is over.
That's right.
And his name was Wexler, and couldn't ask for more. And so he and I have become great friends. And so I'm a great friend of Les and his wife, but even more important, I'm a great friend of that building, the museum, and the people of that wonderful town who supported it so well.
Well, thank you, sir. That is just awesome. So first of all, thanks to all of our Desert Shield and Desert Storm veterans, and thanks to all of our veterans, and then especially thanks to General Colin Powell for sharing your insights and memories and And really, you know, we say that there'll be a tear shed at the NVMM, but never a pity. And today we saw the great humanity that you have, sir, and the emotion and the love of people and of soldiers in particular and veterans. So thank you so much. And we look forward to this full package coming together. Next, they'll see the video that the VA put together. And then everyone has a chance to go to our website, nationalvmm.org, and get involved with us as well. And sir, as always, I'll give you the final word. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to add a word or two for the citizens who supported us.
Yes.
For all the reservists that joined. Nobody blinked. Everybody came. And essentially for all those who gave us the logistics we needed. And a special thank you to all the allies who joined with us, because this was terror that had to be put down. And a great thanks to you guys sitting there, the two of you, and all the others who are part of the team. And keep going. Let me know if you need me again. Take care, guys.
Thank you. God bless you, sir. Take care. All right.
We have to make sure that when we go to war for a reason. We have to make sure that we've done everything we can to try not to have a war. But if one comes, fight it, and fight it to the death. Fight it so they know that America cannot be challenged in this way. The day came when I received an order from President Bush that I sent to General Schwarzkopf saying, start the conflict. Norm and I had a common view of how to deal with it. We started the conflict with air power. And air power did a great job in softening the battlefield. But everybody could tell that the ground war was going to start sooner. Norm had prepared for it months before it happened. The Iraqis did not know what they were getting into. They did not know what they were facing. And so they tried to get ready for it. They did everything to try to slow us down when the time came. General Schwarzkopf, myself, and all of the other commanders and enlisted people watched all of this. We found that the way we're going to get through it was the fact that the Iraqis weren't moving around. They were just sitting there. And so time passes, we're getting more and more ready. We have developed a plan, and the plan said we will go around and flank the Iraqi army because they're not moving. I told our troops, I don't want to waste lives attacking them head on. Just have them offshore, and that will freeze the Iraqis in place, and we'll go around it. The day comes, and the war starts on the ground. And as that war starts on the ground, I get a call. Hey, something's changed, sir. So what is it? The Marines have been able to penetrate right through the firewall, right through the minefield. They've been watching it for weeks and know exactly how to get through it. So where are they now? They are through it all, and they're heading to Kuwait City. And the rest of the Marine Corps is going right behind it. We got word to our commanders in the Army, get that corps moving or you're going to miss it. It was only 2 days, and it was clear that the conflict was going to come to an end. Before it was all over, we had a situation that we took to the president one morning and said to the President, this is going well. And in the not too distant future, we'll come back to you and say it's time to stop this conflict. So the president said, well, if we're that close, why can't we bring it to an end right away? And I said, well, I have to call General Schwarzkopf. He's a commander. General Schwarzkopf said, we can do this. We can bring it to a halt. And that's what we did.
Our armed forces fought with honor and valor. And as president, I can report to the nation, aggression is defeated. The war is over.
People could not believe it was over. The 100-hour war, they called it. But it was over. And we succeeded. Let no one tell you otherwise. I was there. We freed Kuwait. I'm so proud of what those young soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines did. Well, I'll go to war when you want me to, but until we have to, let's see what we can do to solve the problem. If you can't solve it politically, then put all your power behind it and go and take it out. And that's what we did in Desert Storm.
Thank you for joining us today, and thank you to those veterans who served during Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm. We've got two great events coming up this week. On Tuesday, March 2nd at 6:30 p.m., we've got Marine Kirstie Ennis. She is the daughter of two Marines. She's a Paralympian. She's a motivational speaker. She's a businesswoman. She's been featured in several magazines. She's also an above-the-knee amputee. She suffered traumatic injuries in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan in 2012, and despite her injuries, she's overcome every obstacle in her way. She's also an accomplished mountain climber. So she's going to tell us about her story. It's truly inspiring. Come join us. And then on Saturday, March 6th, from 10 to 12, we've got Tony Main, the program director for the Gallant Few. The Gallant Few is a network of 20,000 Americans who provide assistance to veterans and military members getting ready to transition. So 2 great events coming up this week. Please join us if you can, and have a great Sunday.
Wars aren't fought by countries. They're fought by people. Now, hear their stories in their own words. Honor their service in your own way. At the only museum in America that gives a voice to all our veterans. The National Veterans Memorial and Museum. It's more than a museum. It's the new home of the brave.